Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us. This is Zachary Ring from Thea Enterprises. I'm joined by James Romulin from Thea and Becca Ryan from Lutron. I think that we know most of you. I think you guys know us. You guys are mostly Ketra dealers, so we've worked with you in the past. And I said this last week, and I'll say it again. I like this because you really are the best dealers, right? You're not just slinging raw two at this point. You've climbed the Lutron ladder, and you're pretty much at the pinnacle when you're offering a luxury lighting solution like Ketra. And what I love about this is it just keeps becoming easier when it comes to designing the system and programming the system and commissioning the system, but there's still some key elements about lighting that we all really need to understand to make sure that we're comfortable having conversations about lighting and being lighting experts. Also, I don't want the first time that you see the software to be when you're at a job site on a Friday afternoon. I think it's good for us to go through everything together. You're all smart. I'm sure you could figure it out. But I think it's nice to be here in a controlled environment, going at a slower pace, just really going through the whole design, programming, commissioning process together. All right. So I start a lot of times with my load schedule. And one thing that's pretty cool about this is why I was still at Lutron. We are trying to figure out the best way to do this. And I loved working with the user experience team. They didn't really like working with me because they think they'd have a great idea, or they'd have a great idea, be like, I don't think that's going to work. So this is one thing that we actually agreed on. If I'm doing ecosystem loads or Ketra loads, I get to choose how many fixtures are going to be in this zone, or how many loads are going to be in here. So if I have a group of downlights and I know I'm going to have 8 Ketra downlights that I need to activate in this downlight zone, I'm going to say add zone with 8 loads of Ketra color, intensity, and vibrancy. So I click add, and now look, it's going to show as one zone, which is convenient, but then within that, I have my 8 different fixtures. I could do the same thing for table lamps. Maybe I have table lamps flanking my couch, so I'll do 2, add that in, we'll call that table lamps, plural, and maybe I have a floor lamp with just one bulb in it. There we go. So that's how you add your loads. Want to make sure that you add in your gateway, your processor, all the other necessary equipment that you need, but this is how you do the loads. Normally, I'll do all the system design and the programming before we go to the job site and start activating. So let me come in here. I'll go to a device. I put in an Elise keypad because I love Elise keypads. No more needing to make control groups or build a scene somewhere else and then import the scene and then trigger it at the room level. There's no more crazy mapping. This is way easier than the merger of Design Studio and HomeWorks QS. So it's just like programming any other load. I want you to go to 75%, I want you to go to 25, and I want you to go to 50. And then maybe I want to do, I would normally do this in a cove, but if I wanted to give a splash of color, I go in here, boom, splash of color on my floor lamp. If I want to do warm cool, right, I come in here, I do that, or I can enable a warm dim curve. You can save colors, you can import colors. And why don't I have any shows here? Well, it's because I haven't built any natural shows yet. Couple things I want to point out, something that was not supported before in QS with Ketra was cycle dim. Products like the Elise keypad, which a lot of times aren't going to have a raise lower, you are going to want to use cycle dim on your Elise keypad. So you go ahead and you enable it there. You can have your double tap programming. You have to click allow double tap, but you can have your double tap programming. But as you can see, it's super easy to go in here and build scenes for warm, cool, or full saturated color. If I want to pick a specific color, I can add this as a saved color 1. I would recommend using the auto vibrancy function. What this is going to do is going to try to like optimize your CRI and your vibrancy. If you just go around and say, oh, vibrancy is good, I'm just going to max out my vibrancy everywhere, there's a trade-off, and we're sacrificing CRI. So unless you're illuminating a piece of art or a sculpture or piece of furniture or something that, or flowers or fruit, right? Then maybe you jack it up to 100% vibrancy. Every other time, I personally recommend leaving it on auto. So that's it. I mean, that's basic button programming. Time clock programming is going to look the same. The only thing that's going to really look different is when we start dealing with the shows. So if I want to start building some shows, it's almost like if I build a sequence or something else. So I go to program, then I go to define natural show. And I'm going to add a natural show. Maybe I'll call this default. First choice you're going to want to make is whether or not you want this to include intensity. We didn't have this option before, and I love that we have this option now. So I can choose to not include intensity, and then we can set the intensity however we want, and just the color temperature is going to change throughout the day. So I like that personally. With the old Ketra, with the Ketra that I have now, a lot of times, depending on my work schedule and what I'm doing around the house and everything else, yeah, it's getting dark outside, but I still have stuff to do inside. I would like the lights to start to warm up a little bit, right? As I'm winding down for the day, getting ready for dinner, everything else, but maybe I still want the lights to be bright. So that's where it's nice to separate this. If you want to function like the normal natural show, you just set it and forget it, you include the intensity. The nice thing is you can have multiple shows, and I can have, right? I can have one that does not include intensity and just uncheck that. You can change the start times. Well, I mean, personally, part of the magic of this is it mimicking what the sun is doing. So maybe look at starting it and ending it with a like the ramp down start time. You probably want to do that based off of the astronomic time versus doing a fixed time. I like this graphical representation of what's going on down here. You can really go for that candlelight effect if you want, and you can really get super energized, super energizing light during the middle of the day if you want. If you ask my opinion, I think that 4200-ish is going to be where you want to max out, and this gets a little too amber sometimes, but it all comes down to personal preference. Once again, you can choose the vibrancy level. I would just have it set to auto, so it's optimizing vibrancy and CRI throughout the day. So now what do I do with this? Well, I apply it to a button. So I come in here, go to shows, and I select the show that I want, and it applies it to all the lights in the room. If I choose no intensity, Now, when I press the button, I say, oh, all right, I want you guys to do this, but I want the show to still define the CCT throughout the day. But that's it, guys. The programming here is very straightforward. To be transparent, I think we lost some functionality. You know, maybe it was 2 steps forward, 1 step backwards. There's some things like the G2 grouping, some DMX control options. There's some things that aren't here that were there with the Ketra Tech tool and the full-blown design studio. But if I had to pick a solution, I would pick this one in terms of ease of programming, you know, having other people on my team doing the programming, trusting they're not going to mess it up catastrophically, saving time, just it makes everything a lot easier. Brendan, so that's a great question. I haven't tried Edit Live yet. I haven't heard that Edit Live doesn't work with Ketra, so I'm thinking maybe we can edit live and see the changes real time. Worst case scenario, now that we can make Ketra edits to scenes in the app, you could at least go in the app and make some tweaks in the app and then save that programming back to the button on the wall. So we would technically have that option, but awesome. I'm gonna have to test that out myself next time I'm in front of my QSX system in the office, and we'll follow up with everybody and let you know how that works. So after I'm done with my programming, I want to go and I want to do the commissioning of the system. And I'm not connected real time to my system, but I went through the whole process and took lots of screenshots. Here I have the activate processor screen. So this is where you're going to activate the QSX processor, and this is also where you'd activate your ClearConnect Type X gateway. Remember I said think of it like a processor. It's going to show up here for activation. A couple changes. One change, I like this. They say firmware upgrade required. So before you even go to transfer, it lets you know that you need a firmware upgrade. In the old system, you go to transfer and it's like, oh, you need a firmware upgrade. You can't go any farther. Sorry. Here, it might help you like, oh, I'm going to go grab a bite to eat or go grab a smoke or something like that. I know this is going to need to do a firmware update before I transfer. Also, I like this feature. You get to choose which NIC address you get to use for communication. So I get to choose whether I want to use Wi-Fi or Ethernet. Now this is good, but it can also burn you. Let's say that you connected to Ethernet and then later on you're not connected to Ethernet and you're trying to use the Wi-Fi. This isn't going to automatically switch if you have this box checked. So it's going to say failed to communicate to the processor, and you're like, what's going on? I'm on the network, everything looks good. Come down here and check this setting. You might have to uncheck this box or just click it over to Wi-Fi. That literally happened to me when I was testing this out. It's like, why can't I communicate? I was communicating a minute ago. So certain things aren't going to be able to be changed until I apply the firmware update. So I'm going to go to Tools, do Upgrade Processors. Here, it's telling me that this is the version that I have in my software currently. Not what's on my processor, but what's in my software. So I want to check for the latest firmware. And it's like, hey, your firmware file's up to date. Once again, that's the firmware in the software, obviously not the firmware on the processor. So I hit next, and it's going to start installing my firmware update. If I had a QSX processor in there, the ClearConnect Type X gateway, rather, I can go ahead and firmware update that the same way. So here I added my gateway. It's telling me I need to do a firmware update. I go to Tools, Upgrade Processor Firmware. You're not going to find an Update Gateway Firmware. And then you go ahead and you push the firmware update. All right, how do we activate the Ketra devices? Well, you power up the devices, then you use the app to identify and assign them to the right zones, and then you're going to sync that information back with the computer. Couple heads up items. Download iTunes on your computer. Do it today after you're done with this. It's a Windows machine. It might not be intuitive to have iTunes on there. You will need iTunes to sync your iPhone. So if you have an iPhone, you're going to need iTunes, and then you're also going to need your USB cable. So to do the sync, plug it in, and then click Sync Connected Devices. So what does this look like on the phone to activate the Ketra devices? So I'm going to click here. It's going to, after I do that, it's going to say, all right, go to the design software and click Sync Connected Devices. After I do that, I go into my area tree. I'm literally going to be able to unplug my phone at this point, walk around, and search for nearby lamps. When it finds one, it's going to turn it blue. Maybe that's not the one that I want to activate. So I click next, goes to the next light. That one starts flashing. Nope. So I went back to the first one, click assign this lamp, and now I can add it into my table lamps group. I just click the plus, and it's going to assign that device, go to the next one, hit plus, and then it's going to assign that device. Now I'm finished. Maybe I had these designated as left and right table lamps, right? Just in my load schedule, and I did them backwards. So I'm gonna click to unassign the lamp, moves it back up here, and now I'll just do it in the opposite order. So you know what, this one, I'm gonna make you number 1, or number 2 rather, and I'm gonna make you number 1 by clicking on the plus down here. Then I click finish, and then I'm gonna go to the design software, the HomeWorks software, and I'm going to hit sync, and it's going to sync the information back to the computer, letting it know what I just did with my phone. Then I connect to the system. I just want to make sure everything works. Go to table lamps, and this looks familiar to what we had in the Connect app. Now let's say I'm hunting for Lutron Blue and I can't quite find it. This is the feature that James was talking about. I can hit this camera icon here. This is awesome. So I hit camera, I say okay, I go to a Lutron Blue box, find the blue color that I want, and I hit try this color. And now it uses its 16 plus million colors and gets me that exact Lutron blue, or that exact blue that was in the Warhol painting. So I love that. You have the CCT slider, and now you have a vibrancy slider. So it's not just on and off anymore at 3000K. You can set that. And little just notes for the homeowner here at the bottom: what's vibrancy, what's the full color control. And then when you're done setting it up, you can send the homeowner an invite email, letting them know that their system is set up and ready to use. Now, how do I deactivate the lamps? Maybe I just did a little test setup at my office and I want to deactivate, factory reset the Ketra devices. It's just saying after I deactivate, it may take several minutes to be able to start to control neighboring Ketra devices. So if I'm not deactivating everything, just know that it's going to take a bit to do this. Also, after deactivating the device, make sure you go back to HomeWorks and force a full transfer to make sure that everything on the system is up to date. So I put my phone near the Ketra device that I want to deactivate. Then I'm going to power cycle the circuit. So I'm going to switch off the breaker. I'm going to unplug the lamp, whatever I need to do to power cycle the circuit. I think this is cute. They give you a little countdown timer here in the app just to make sure that you're really counting to 5. So, all right, I counted to 5, power it back up. Now I'm going to hit continue, and I'm going to proceed to deactivate the lamps. Proximity-based communication to the lamps to get them to flash. Make sure that I'm deactivating the correct device. I can toggle back and forth just like I did when I assigned them. Then I click deactivate. Same warning again. Always good to read these warnings. Device deactivated. Go to the next one. Deactivate this device. Are you sure? Do you really want to do this? Yes, I'm sure. And now they're all deactivated, so it's not going to find any other lamps nearby. And it's really as easy as that. If you're familiar with the old process, it would have taken us much more time to create the Design Studio installation, do the programming in Design Studio, import the shows and scenes into HomeWorks, map the groups to their areas, program them to buttons. Oh, right, I can't do the zone by zone programming in here. Let me go back to Design Studio to make the change. Publish in Design Studio, activate in Design Studio, transfer in HomeWorks. It would have taken much longer to do all this. We managed to really, it was a very small system, but we managed to do the layout, the programming, the activation, and even the deactivation in 15 minutes, I'd say. So it's a pretty straightforward process, and I'm really excited about that.